Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today, we're welcoming Jessie Lane, an interior designer who created what might be the most unique cabin interior I've ever seen. During the pandemic, Jessie and her husband purchased a log cabin in North Carolina, sight unseen, launching a 3-year design journey that challenges everything you think you know about cabin interiors. Jessie loves novelty and wants spaces to transport people, which explains her unconventional approach. What started as Big Sur-inspired 70s plans evolved into fairy tale meets Art Nouveau. Did I say that right? Complete with stained glass windows, rich wallpapers applied alongside massive logs, and custom furniture pieces that she invented for the space. This is a masterclass in creative problem solving and trusting artistic instincts. Jessie discovered that working with logs means embracing richness rather than fighting it, why cream walls felt unfinished next to natural wood, and how a failed stained glass installation led to an even better solution that became the centerpiece of the kitchen. We explore her design philosophy from incorporating family heirlooms to creating custom pieces like the Shasha sofa that transforms from seating to a guest bed. Jessie also opens up about the emotional challenges of the creative process and why she believes design is about creating soulful spaces for your story. Whether you're designing around existing wood elements, mixing traditional and modern pieces, or learning to trust your creative instincts, this conversation offers practical advice and permission to create something truly different. Let's do it. Thank you for doing this. I'm really excited to chat.
It's great to meet you. I'm glad I'm here.
I have so many questions. Interior design is an area that I'm obsessed with and not very good at. So anytime I get to pick the brain of an interior designer, it is just a true delight. It's always interesting because we get on the podcast and I've done so much research, so I feel like I know you, but our listeners haven't done that and you don't know me. So I'd love for you to start by describing yourself. Like, how would your friends describe you? Give us a little intro.
Oh, how would my friends describe me? That is a different question. I think I'll start off by saying I'm definitely an optimist and I think you kind of have to be if you're in interior design or construction or anything like that, because everything that can go wrong will go wrong and then some. And so I do think that I tend to look on the bright side of things and believe that somehow everything is just gonna work out. I grew up in the South. Clearly, you can tell from my accent. Now live in Los Angeles. Was a homeschool mom, which is crazy. I would not recommend that to anybody unless you have to. But
you homeschooled your kids?
I did. I chose to do that until my kids were in like 8th grade and 3rd grade. And so and even then I was still designing. I loved it. I had been doing that in North Carolina before we moved here. And different time in my life. And so then as we were moving around, trying to figure out where we were going to be in LA, I kept doing that and had a community here. And then my kids went to public school, and then we found the schools that worked for their unique learning styles. So that was kind of my full-time job, even though I was dabbling in design because it's always been my love. So when they both went to school, I started my business, Jessie Lane Interiors, and just love creating unique projects for clients. I really, I've been officially in earnest, had my business since 2019, even though, I've been doing this my whole life in one way or another. But I am really, even 6 years in now, really clarifying the kinds of jobs that I do want to do. And I think it's kind of stepping into my own understanding who I am as a designer, which is also an artist, and actually kind of being able to say, like, this is art. What I do is art. And therefore, it might not be for everybody. It's a big part of it is self-expression for
Yeah.
me. And yet also finding out, of course, what the client wants and how to
Yeah.
kind of give them a home that is, I like to say, like them on their best day, the best version of themselves,
Yeah.
and then the home that can hold them on the days that they're the worst versions of
Yeah.
themselves, because we have
Yeah.
that as well. But I do think that place, environment, I did not realize how sensitive I am to environment and how that's kind of something that I've had my whole life. And so I really want to give clients, both commercial and residential clients, just spaces that are inspiring and, that transport them.
Mm.
That is something I'm really uh, just coming to the conclusion that I love novelty. That's kind of a foundational um, love of mine. It's something about my personality that I think I'm really understanding more and more at this
Yeah.
young age of 44 years old.
Yeah.
And I want people to feel transported when they walk
Yeah.
into the spaces that I design. I want them to feel like this is, this takes me somewhere. Wow, I haven't felt like this before. Where
Mhm.
am I? What is the story
Yeah.
behind this
Yeah.
place? And just, yeah.
Which is like the opposite of trends, right? Because novelty by definition has to be
Mm,
something that you haven't seen or felt before.
mm,
How do
mm,
you navigate that of clients who might have seen things on Pinterest or in a magazine and want something similar while also sticking to your North Star, your
mm,
design style, and keeping it novel and different from anything they've seen before?
That's such, I hadn't really thought of that idea as novelty being different from trends, but you're right about that. I think the thing about trends, a lot of trends, maybe not all trends, but is they usually are a callback to something, and you see
Mm.
this, we're cyclical. Everything is
Yes.
cyclical. The nature of design, the nature of fashion, they're connected. And so usually trends are trying to call back to another time. It just
Yeah.
is being done in kind of a way that maybe we haven't seen done before, or with additional references than what we've seen. So
Yeah.
I think that there's a way to incorporate trends, as long as they're not the only thing you see. I mean, you look at the trend of like white boucle, which we've seen on everything. I have chairs that, you know, are white boucle, unfortunately. And it's not that white boucle has never been done before. Boucle, is a fabric that we've seen, of course, for years in fabrics, but it came back, it exploded, and it was white. And so maybe that was kind of the new spin on it. But I think like boucle in and of itself is a fabric we've seen.
Okay, boucle. Can you tell us what boucle is?
Boucle is just a nubby kind of, like, it
Okay.
almost looks like a sheep's
Yes, I know what you're
wool
talking about.
fabric. It's a great fabric. It's interesting. It's textural. And so, it's like, okay, if somebody really wants boucle, well, maybe can we do that in a different color? Or can we add other things in there that are going to feel more grounded and more historical?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I have one more like big picture design question. Then I want to start talking about your cabin and I have more
Okay.
questions. But the big picture one is this idea, like I like what you were saying of like it took a while to find your style and like what you
Hmm.
want to do more of. And I can imagine when you're doing client work, there is this tricky balance of
Hmm.
sticking to the kind of design that is yours and pushing back when they have ideas that are maybe not going to look good in a space. How do
Yeah.
you navigate that?
I think that's something I'm still learning to navigate, but it's also coming to terms with the fact that you're not going to be able to work with everybody, and that there are
Mhm.
some clients that it would be served better by using a designer that had a vision that was more similar to theirs.
Yeah.
I am someone who loves color. I want to see a lot of color and texture and interest, and I like mixing vintage and modern. And
Yeah.
I you see that done in lots of ways, and it's not always good. I would like to think that, like, I do that in a way that still feels cohesive and makes
Yeah.
sense.
Mhm.
But that's not going to be for everybody. I'm not a purist. I think there are beautiful things. You can pull things from everywhere, and from all kinds of inspiration.
Yeah.
So, one of the things I'm trying to do is to really get clear on the kinds of clients that are going to be served
Yeah.
best by working with me, and that it will be a mutually beneficial and synergistic relationship
Yeah.
where we play off of each other, and
Mhm.
we just enhance the vision that we both have for that person's space. And so I think the longer I do this, the better I get at understanding from the get-go who would be better, who which clients would be a better match.
Yep. Yep. And I think that's the work of any business owner. I
Mhm.
own a business, so I can relate to that, but also those hosting guests at their properties too, of figuring out who am
Yes.
I designing my space
Yep.
for
Yep.
and making choices all in for those people and not worrying
Yep.
about who might not like the design.
It's true. That is a big part of it. I think when you start off, you're just like, any kind of work I can get is
Yeah.
positive. But then the thing that I've really come to is like, if I'm doing work that I don't love, like that is going to actually create more work that I don't love,
Yeah.
or that is not, my necessarily my wheelhouse, and that
Mhm.
doesn't bring me joy. And I know, that is definitely a position of privilege to be able to think, I want I
Yeah.
want this. We
Yeah.
can't always do that, but as much as I am able, um, I would like to have clients that share my vision for their
Yeah.
space.
Yeah. And in such a visual field, you have to be able to
Yeah.
show what you want to do. And so the
Yes.
more
Yeah.
work you do that you're like, I don't want to show this to anyone because I don't want to do more
Yes.
of that,
Yep.
it's hard. And I think,
Mhm.
oh, go ahead.
No, I 100% agree. And you see that it's the kind of thing, that the longer you do it, the more you realize that. And it's so scary. I think it's scary to say, hey, we're not a good fit, or
Yeah.
no to a project that you're like, but this is work, this is
Mhm.
meaningful. They're going to pay me.
Yes.
But I'm really coming to the place where I just want to hold out for the projects that are special. And I
Yeah.
I really want to do special projects. I want to
Yeah.
do create bespoke interiors that take people somewhere.
Hell yeah. I love that. And I think in the cabin space, we need more of that design because I think there's been a lot in recent years as Instagram becomes more popular of
Mhm.
like copy paste
Yeah.
and like, oh, this looks good here instead of
Mhm.
let's create experiences for people. So
Mhm.
that brings me to your cabin because this
Mhm.
is what I love. I've seen so many cabins and I have never seen a cabin like yours. And so take us back to the beginning of like what started that journey for you. And then we'll move into the
Mhm.
design elements that really spoke to me the most as I watched like a full tour of it. But how did that journey start?
Well, it was sometime during the pandemic when my husband was like, prices are really going up in North Carolina, and that's where his family and my family are. And if we ever want to have land, which is, hard to come by in LA, but
Mhm.
also just a place that anchors us to where we grew up, to our family, a place where when we go home, because we do go home often, where we can all gather,
Yeah.
if we want to do that, we should do that now.
Yeah.
And I was like, great. My only requirement is that it be something that can be interesting for my portfolio, because if
Yeah.
I'm doing a whole house, I want it to be something that is unlike anything I've ever done before or will do.
And you're
And
the client. So you get to
that's
make
right.
all of the
Yeah.
decisions, no compromises.
Well, yeah, some comfort, but yes, more than typical for sure.
Yeah. Yes.
Um, and so, yeah, that started our process. My brother-in-law is an amazing real estate agent in North Carolina,
Mm.
so that definitely helped Chris Tanas. And my sister and him started help sending us places we were looking. And I think within a week of looking, I came across this cabin.
A week?
Within a week of looking online, because we were, this was during COVID, so we were
Yeah.
not looking there. I came across this cabin, and like within 24 hours, my sister also sent me the cabin. And so that felt very, like it was meant to be. So we
Yeah.
said, okay, great. Well, why don't you guys go tour it for us? Like it seemed to hit all of the marks. I've never been considered myself a cabin person. Like that was not within, I was thinking, oh, maybe some kind of old Southern home, like, I don't know, something Victorian, something, who knows?
Yeah.
But cabin wasn't really something that I was considering until we saw this. And the wood in this cabin in the pictures was just like so beautiful and mellow. I think it really surprised me, because I know sometimes, pine or knotty pine can go kind of orange or
Mhm.
brown. It felt very calming and soothing.
Yeah.
So my sister said, okay, we'll go tour it for you, because we were across the country. So
Right.
she and my brother-in-law, Chris, went and toured it with us on FaceTime. And they had the same feeling we did, that like, this place has good vibes. I can't describe it. And I don't know. I think part of that is wood. More and more of my or more and more of the research that is coming out is just talking about how much natural materials, nature, what kind of effect it has on
Yes.
us.
Yes.
And there's a field called neuroaesthetics, and I have some friends who are deeply involved in this field, and they're just studying what even spending time watching videos of nature. It's a thing called
Huh.
soft fascination, where, watching a fire burn, watching the ocean, the waves of the ocean come in.
Mhm.
These things where there's a little bit of movement, but it's quiet. It's peaceful. It makes you feel like you're in nature. I wish
Uh-huh.
I had all of the research at my fingertips that I could
Yeah.
share with you, but they did some incredible things with the doctors um, who were in the emergency rooms during COVID, having a space where they could go and sit and watch these videos of whether it was a fire burning or whether it was the ocean,
Right.
and what it did to decrease their cortisol, their
Yeah.
anxiety during that time.
Yeah.
And it actually helps us to integrate some of the big emotions that we have, so that they
Mm.
don't become trauma. They actually become integrated in something that we can work with and make us
Yep.
grittier and stronger.
Yeah.
So all of that to get back to these big old logs that were in this cabin, I do think that might be part of why we just felt this like release when we looked at
Yeah.
these logs. They were beautiful. And I still feel that when I walk in the door of the cabin, it's like I just breathe out.
Yeah.
Um, and that is something that's really special about cabins that we
Yeah.
don't have. We have
Yeah.
drywall now.
That's right.
Um,
And truly
and
log cabins, because log
yes,
cabins are
yes,
different than just your average cabin too.
that's true. That is absolutely true. So yeah, that began this like basically 3-year process of us starting to remodel this cabin from across the country. So we bought it without seeing it,
Wow.
with only
A
seeing
lot
it
of
over
people did that in
FaceTime.
COVID though. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And and I have never regretted it. I think there were a few days where my husband was like, "What did we do?" Because we were
Fair.
dealing with all kinds of critters. It was, of
Yeah.
course, ended up being way more money than we had originally.
Always.
Always, of course. And I knew that as a designer, I knew that, and yet it's still surprising to me,
Yep.
because I'm thinking about, what stone are we going to put in, and then we realize, oh, we actually need to put in a whole driveway, so that we can even get to the house. So
Yeah.
our
The
elderly family
unsexy
members,
thing. Yes.
yes, yeah.
Ugh.
Um,
And you were
So
dreaming about all the things that will make it beautiful. And you're like, okay, well, what are
exactly.
the functional things we have to do first?
Yes. Oh, we had to put a new roof on. We had to,
Mhm.
it's things that we did not anticipate, of course,
Yeah.
as this tale as old as time.
Yes. We're at the beginning stages of our next project. And my husband is focused on like the structural stuff. And I'm like, well,
Yes.
how much is that going to cut into my design budget? Because
Uh-huh.
I want to get moving on
Absolutely.
the inside. So, how do you even begin?
Mhm.
I guess I'm very intrigued by this design process of a large cabin for someone who is admittedly not a cabin person or a log
Mhm.
cabin person,
Yeah.
because it ties your hands a little bit in terms of design.
Mhm.
Now, you have done some extraordinary things in it that I've never seen in a cabin, and we can talk about those. But big picture, when you looked at it, how did you even start that process of thinking about what to do?
Yeah, it's funny because I think in the beginning, and this is how it is with most projects, I really do believe that as much as time as people can take, like it's a good thing. I know we're so everything is so quick. I mean, I even think
Yeah.
about the Instagram reels or TikTok reels you see where somebody snaps their fingers
Yep.
and then you automatically see it change. And it's so far from the truth
Yeah.
of how this is. And for me, I have become a little more comfortable with, this is especially when it's my own project, much more than I can do with a client. I'm going to kind of sit with this. I'm going to see kind of what the home tells me.
Yeah.
And I'm like very much a 70s girl. I always have some elements of, I will probably never get over wearing bell bottoms. I'll be wearing them for the rest of I'll be like 80 still wearing my bell bottoms.
They're
And
such
so
a flattering look. Why isn't everyone wearing they look good
I
on
agree.
everybody.
I totally agree. And so I, thought originally I was going to go with like a Big Sur kind of 70s
Mhm.
feeling, natural, like a lot of natural elements, maybe some, you know, I hate to say boho vibes because I would not call that my style, but just thinking of like a Big Sur kind of
Yeah.
little 70s feel. And then the more I was in the space, the more I thought about the space. And the more I saw, even what was kind of the direction that trends were going, honestly, I was like, I don't think that that's the right direction for this. And I
Yeah.
think a big part of it for me was being in the South. My mom, I grew up around so many beautiful antiques because my mom is a designer and would take me to, the rug store with her. And
Mhm.
at my wedding, we had we had the reception in my parents' backyard, and there were
Oh,
Persian rugs laid out because my parents were friends with the rug guy, and so he just
yeah.
brought the Persian rugs and laid them out. So I had you know, gone a little bit away from the more traditional, some of the more traditional furnishings in my design here in LA. And I felt like this would be a fun opportunity to kind of get back to some of that, especially because we were really thinking of this as a family home.
Yeah.
My grandma passed away, who I was incredibly close to a few years before we started working on this. And so it had some of her
Mhm.
things to put in it, her
Mhm.
rugs, her braided rugs, her old clock. And so that is kind of what began this process of me moving towards something that felt on some level historic and yet
Mhm.
also I think the scale of the logs was just so large it did
Yeah.
feel a little fantastical. And
Yeah.
so I started, and I'm really into like Jungian psychology, depth psychology, like all these archetypal myths. And so the idea of thinking of this as this almost mythic um, space was really fun to me. So we
Yeah.
started kind of moving in this more fairy tale direction. And,
Yeah.
originally somehow Art Deco got thrown in there. And then the more I started researching, the more I was like, oh, Art Nouveau is actually this very natural, organic um, aesthetic. And it makes a lot of sense to mix that with these big, um, big logs. And it also has this very fairy tale mythological feel. And so
Mhm.
I think it was fun. I like to kind of take something and turn it on its head a little bit. And so
Yeah.
that was
Which you
how,
did in a lot of ways.
yeah.
I think it's interesting because I have in my storage unit right now a grandfather clock that my
Mm.
grampy, who I was very close with, made for me, and
Oh,
it's just been
wow.
sitting there because I'm like, I don't know where that fits in
Right.
any of our houses, and when I watched the tour of your cabin and you showed off that grandfather clock from your grandmother, and I was like,
Yes.
"Okay, if Jessie Lane could make this work in one of her houses," I felt so inspired that we have to find a place for it in
Oh,
our
I
new
love
project.
that.
But
Yeah.
I think that's what I was really taken by when seeing the full cabin were the new elements, the
Mhm.
the kind of the different elements like the wallpaper in a log cabin,
Mhm.
and then these very old classic meaningful elements which
Mhm.
add kind of depth to the experience that you're
Mhm.
creating for your family because in your case,
Yeah.
you all don't rent it, correct? It's just for
Yeah,
your family.
we don't. We have been on the fence about that. We considered it, but right now we've decided it's getting a lot of use from our family. We've had friends stay there. We were there this summer for a few weeks. And so right now we feel like it's not just sitting empty. And that was,
Right.
obviously what we did not want. So who knows what will happen in the future, but right now we are not renting it.
Which is nice because what it allows you to do, I think I envy that a little bit. We have to rent ours and it allows you to put like the experience that you're creating. You're not thinking about a stranger or
Right.
a traveler avatar. You're thinking about your family and for
Yeah.
your kids to go into that house and see the grandfather clock from your grandmother.
Yeah.
I just think those are really nice touches.
Yeah.
So I'm going to link this in the show notes for anyone listening, but you were featured in Architectural Digest this summer. This is the tour that I
Mhm.
watched, which was beautiful to be able to see it and hear parts
Thank
of it.
you.
So everybody should go watch that and you can see these giant logs and all the cool design elements. But one thing that really stood out to me is your husband said, hold on, I have it in my notes. I have the general idea, but he said one of the things I love about Jesse's design is that it's not just design, it's inventing. And I thought that was a fascinating take on what
He's
you
a
did
good
in that
hype
space.
man. I guess I
Yeah,
married him for a reason.
that's right. But there were so many elements that you kind of created and invented, not just, sourced, which is what you think of when you think of interior design. Can you share a
Yeah.
couple of those and where that came from?
I think he was most likely talking about the Shasha bed in that
He was. Yeah.
comment. And yeah, that was something I created. It's probably been 7 or 8 years ago now. When we moved to LA, we had this small guest room that was is serves as my office. But when we had guests in town, hospitality is very important to me, and I wanted that guest room to feel like it had a proper bed and not just like a pull-out couch. And at the same
Mhm,
time, that's not super practical because
mhm.
it's not being used as a bedroom on a daily basis.
Right.
And I started looking for something like that on the market. And I just could not find a pretty pull out sofa that actually felt like a bed when you pulled it out. And so I went to my carpenter, upholsterer, fabricator, and started talking with him about that. And so we started a process, which, it takes years to really refine this, of creating this bed that is a sofa. Um, and then the arms come off and it turns into a bed that has bed rails and has a this back that doesn't just look like a sofa back but actually looks like a headboard. And yeah, so I cr- created one in a colorway I had never done before, funky colorway for the cabin. It has fringe on it. Just trying to describe this for people who haven't seen it, which probably most of your listeners. um, and yeah, I think it feels special, and that's what I wanted for my guests. Like even if you're staying on the pull-out sofa, I wanted it to feel special. And so, yeah, I sell this. It's called the Shasha. That is what my sister's name is Ashley. And when my kids were young, they turned that into Shasha. And so that's why it's called the Shasha sofa. And I love, my kind of tagline for my business is soulful spaces for your story, because story is such an important part of how I design. I really want to get to know not not just like what you want the space to look like, but how you live in it. Do
Yeah.
you entertain a lot? Do you cook for your friends weekly? Or are you a reader and we want to have a reading nook? And I do think that figuring out how to make a space both beautiful and functional is really important.
Yeah.
Doing my best not to sacrifice. I mean, I will sometimes sacrifice function for beauty if I have to choose, but
Guilty. I
um,
have done the same.
the best I think is when they both get what they need.
If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Yeah, but there is tension there, I think, a lot
Yeah.
between what you need to function in the space and our new project. There's this beautiful room with these exposed wood ceilings. And I'm like, well,
Mhm.
this is where I want to spend my night. But it's right
Mhm.
next to the kitchen and it's the only space for a dining room to eat breakfast. And so we're
Yeah.
grappling with that right now of like,
Mhm.
oh, I want to like put a huge couch in here, but also you need to eat breakfast or lunch or dinner.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Where you
I
can do
mean,
that.
we had this we moved, so the primary, bedroom that the original owners, had used was not where I wanted the primary bedroom to be,
Yeah.
because the bedroom on the first floor had a balcony, and, you're looking out onto, like, 13 acres, in North Carolina, or 11 acres, I can't remember, somewhere in there, and lots of trees, lots
Yeah.
of animals, and I wanted to be able to use that balcony, so that meant, it was a smaller room, so that meant taking away this large laundry room, taking away a
Yeah.
little sweet little office. But we tore those walls down and created a primary suite. And so now there
Mhm.
are two primary suites in the house, but it's great for guests.
Yeah.
And it's been fun to be able to do, two primary bathrooms.
Yeah. Well, and both of the bathrooms are gorgeous. And it was interesting in the tour because you noted that you've given your guests the nicer of the two bedrooms and maybe the nicer of the two bathrooms. But that speaks, I think, partially probably function that you were trying to navigate, but also this desire for hospitality. It's kind of fun when you can host other
Yeah.
folks and really treat them to something special when
It
they come.
is. It
Yeah.
really is.
Yeah. Okay, so I want to talk about a couple of the other non-traditional elements. I feel like some people would say, and I mentioned this, but I feel like some people would say that wallpaper does not have a place in a log cabin, or even if they wanted it to, how do you functionally make that happen? And
Mhm.
you have done that in multiple places in the cabin. That is beautiful. But how did you do that? When the walls are all logs, like what did you have to change in order to make wallpaper part of that?
It's interesting because when I started off thinking about color palette and, what I was gonna do to kind of I think when I first started, I thought I was working around the logs. And then I
Mhm.
quickly learned that no, I was working with the logs. And what I thought would work with the logs was very different than what I discovered actually worked with the logs. And I
Yeah.
think it's just that the logs are so rich. I thought, oh, I'm going to have just a lot of it's so funny because it's so the opposite of how I ended. But in the beginning, it was like, oh, I'll do a lot of cream to kind of offset all of this wood and it'll make it feel light. And it really, any of the cream walls that I started with, I ended up either repainting or wallpapering,
Yeah.
um, because the logs are so rich. It was like you needed something rich to match them, or the
Mhm.
places that there was drywall felt unfinished,
Yeah.
and like it happened again and again and again. And what I realized, and again, this is speaks to the natural world. Like you think about what you see with trees outside, you don't see trees and then just white. Like how
Yeah.
rich is nature?
Yeah.
Um, there's so many colors, so much depth. And so the wood, I would put wallpaper beside it and it would make both kind of sing.
Yeah.
Whereas, when it was just a cream wall, it made them fall flat.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that was something surprising that I learned. I really learned what that particular wood called for. Wood is as varied as wallpaper in
Yeah.
that each kind of wood has a different tone, has a different color, has a different pattern. I'm working on a project right now, and we're cladding most of a room in burl. And it's so exciting because it's like a dream project that we would get to do half of a room in burl. We're doing some really crazy things with it, but it's just to learn what works with that burl. That is a pattern. Burl is very pattern forward. And so, then seeing how are we going to use, what stone are we going to use? What kind of
Yeah.
movement in that stone to kind of complement? That's a lot like pattern mixing,
Yeah.
thinking about the pattern in burl and the pattern in a natural stone.
Yeah. Yeah. So I used to own a log cabin in the mountains of North Carolina, and
Oh, no way.
yeah, and that was my biggest challenge. It was the only property we've owned where I did not hire an interior designer because it was my
Mm,
first one. And
mm,
looking back, I mean, we had like no budget, but I wish I had
yeah.
because it was potentially the most challenging because there's wood
Mhm,
everywhere. A
mhm,
lot of furniture that you would buy is wood. So
mhm,
matching wood tones, well, wait, that's too much of the same color. Okay,
mhm,
so what do you
mhm,
put here? What advice? And I think a lot of people listening have cabins with elements of wood in it. What advice
mhm.
would you have for them when playing with almost entirely wood walls?
You know, I do think if you think about kind of the uh, rules of pattern mixing, you can kind of follow that with wood mixing. For me, what I realized is the dark wood looked really beautiful, deep wood looked really beautiful with the knotty pine because it picked up on the deep knots in that knotty pine.
Yeah,
But there
that's
was enough of a contrast. What wood didn't work is wood that was close but not the same. And even
right,
for me, I didn't want to do a lot of knotty pine because I think knotty pine there is a super primitive element to it, which can be beautiful, but yeah, we were already seeing that with the logs.
right.
So I wanted to kind of add to that. The idea of mixing eras, it's not easy. I do think it's an art,
Yeah,
and it's something that takes time. Some things I brought in that I thought would work and they just didn't work. And sometimes that's not something you're gonna be able to anticipate. You kind of
yeah.
have to see a
Trial
piece
and
of
error.
furniture in the space. And um, I was listening to Rick Rubin's The Creative Act. I don't know if you've read that or listened to that,
No.
but it's really, it was so encouraging, especially at points where I was running into problems that were frustrating. And I think that is something I'm learning in my own creative process, is that the creative process is frustrating, and that's okay. That's actually
Mhm.
right. That is
Yeah.
part of it. And I think the less we can judge our frustration through the creative process, the easier it gets. And
Yeah.
listening to that book in the middle of some things that were not working, that I was really trying to make work, and that I'm just like, I'm a failure. I can't do this. Like,
Yes.
why do I think I can design? And then getting okay with that and saying, I'm not a failure. This is just part of the process. Like,
Yeah.
this is any type of artist,
Yes.
any across the board. You have to kind of have some duds along the way.
Yes.
And then you take those duds and you make them into
That's
something.
right. That's
It's
right.
the whole, it's like writing. You have to
Yeah.
have that shitty first draft. I don't know if we
Yep.
can cuss on this
Yeah, of course.
podcast.
Cussing welcome.
But it's necessary.
Yeah.
It's not that it's a mistake. It's that it's actually, it's like the framework for the whole
Yeah.
thing. You have to go through it.
Yeah.
And so I think people are, first of all, it takes time, and it can also take money, and that is
Right.
something I understand. That is, not everybody can just do that. But I think if you can give yourself permission in whatever ways are practical and won't be harmful, but if you
Yes.
can give yourself permission to say, like, hey, this is actually a process. I'm not going to snap my fingers. It's not going to fall out of my sleeve. Making something beautiful, making something meaningful, making something that has soul is a process, and it's not a straight line.
Yeah.
And I think the longer I do this, the more comfortable I get with that
Yeah.
idea, and then that makes it less painful.
Yeah.
When you come to the place where you're like, oh, I'm stuck,
Yeah.
instead of beating yourself up, you think, okay, well, let me go do some other creative things, get some inspo. Let me sit with this. Let me figure out how I'm going to solve this creatively. And,
Yeah.
often you will come to something that you never would have come to without that challenge.
Yeah.
And so I think that is, so much of our own pain comes from our own judgment.
Yeah. Yeah. We're the problem. It's not actually
Yes.
everyone else looking at
Yes.
it. One of my best friends is an artist, and I'm a filmmaker, and so I was making a
Ah,
film for her, and she said something brilliant, just offhanded, because she's been doing this for like 30 years. And
yeah.
she said, "Yeah, there's this cycle I go through, and step 1 is this is amazing, and step 2 is,
Mhm.
oh, this is tricky. Step 3, this
Mhm.
sucks. Step 4,
Right.
I suck. Step 5,
Yes.
oh, this just might work. Step 6, this is amazing."
Yeah.
And so it begins
It's
again.
so true. And it's like you have like the macro version of that, and then the micro version of that at every step. I feel
Yeah.
like every little thing. And so I don't know, the more I can accept that that is just a natural part of this process, the
Yeah.
easier that gets. I think the stained glass windows in the kitchen, um, when I started, those were going to go on the hood surround, and that was the plan for those. And I came in, and the contractor had put them up, and it was hilariously bad. I mean, they had put some kind of linear lighting behind them that looked like an orange DOT strip, not through any fault of their own, but just because that's what it ended up looking like through the
Yeah.
glass. And
Yeah.
it's funny because the stained glass artist had told me multiple times, make sure you get natural light through them. And I was like, it's going to be fine. They're going to be in the hood. Like, we'll light them. They'll be beautiful. And I had never worked with stained glass before.
Yeah.
Well, now I have. And now, is one more reminder that, yeah, listen to the people who are working with, if
Yeah.
your subcontractor, if your artist is like, hey, I don't think this is going to work. It- you do need to take that into
Yeah.
consideration.
Though that's
um,
that's a tricky balance though, because and, I feel like contractors and designers typically will often
yes.
butt heads, because oftentimes you're imagining or creating things that they
Mhm.
might have never seen
A
before.
hundred
And it just
percent.
might work. So knowing when I struggled with this a lot, knowing when to be like, okay, you're the expert, I'm going to give in, and when to
Mhm,
be like, no, no,
mhm,
no, no, no. I have a vision.
mhm.
We can make this work is really hard.
Yes, it is, and again, I don't think there's a an answer for that. It's project by project, and it's piece of art by piece of art. And so for
Yeah.
this, I learned like, hey, if you're working with stained glass, you just end up doing the stained glass a disservice if you do not
Yeah.
have natural light coming through
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Um, and that was, something I had to learn the hard way, but it ended up amazingly. Those were very close to the size of two of the kitchen windows. And so we moved those pieces into the kitchen windows. I found a guy who is an incredible window pane slash sash maker,
Hmm.
and kind of fitted them in there for me. But then I had this huge issue of like, okay, well, what am I going to do with this big cream hood now that I have that is just asking for something that I thought was going to
Mm,
be the centerpiece of the kitchen with this stained glass, and now it didn't work. And so here we are. And it was a low moment for me in the
yeah.
design because I just spent hours poring over different architectural features, different things, thinking like I would have done this so differently from the beginning if I had
Yeah.
known that the stained glass wasn't going to work.
Right. Right.
Um, and then we ended up coming to this, I talked to so many different uh, wood crafts people in North Carolina. One, I think, even in Ohio, like, hey, can you help me with this? I'm trying to do this Art Nouveau thing. No, nobody does the Art Nouveau carvings. That's just something that is very hard, especially in wood. And I had
Yeah.
seen a inspo of the true Art Nouveau um, decorative molding was, in this beautiful walnut um, colored wood.
Yeah.
And that was really what I wanted. And so Jen at Refresh Custom Designs, who I was working with the kitchens and bath, the cabinetry and that kind of thing, she was like, why don't you see if you can get somebody to CNC it? And which is, it's almost like a 3D printer type
Huh.
machine cutting printer. I don't even know that can cut out wood. And so
Yeah.
it's flat. It's harder to do, the classical carvings with it, but you can have kind of this approximation of it, which is interesting. And I had actually seen done before in some Art Nouveau projects.
Yeah.
So even that, finding the person who could do that, and every single decorative choice was a journey.
Yeah.
And
But then, I mean, now the outcome of that, thinking, I thought when I looked at your kitchen that that was like the masterpiece of the kitchen. And to hear
yeah,
now that that was the backup option for
yeah,
what you had
yeah,
originally planned is shocking.
yeah,
No one else probably
yeah.
knows that. They walk in and they're like, this is gorgeous. What is this?
Right. And that was one of those things that I'm so happy that I did not give up on.
Yeah.
Um, like I go into the house now and it's so wonderful to go into the cabin and actually be able to rest and enjoy it because we spent a long time
Yeah.
not being able to enjoy it. And
I
I
know that
just,
feeling.
yes, I feel like it was worth it. Like the pain, it is pain. Going through these construction is painful. I mean, this process is not an easy process. Anybody who decides, hey, I'm going to take something that is and turn it into something that I cannot see. I'm going to have a vision, create a place that doesn't actually exist and create a setting that doesn't already exist. It's a painful process. And, that doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just is. And you have so
Yeah.
many different details, so many people you're bringing into it, so many timelines, um, syncing up or not syncing up. So
Yeah. And this
it's,
goes back to your original description of yourself.
mhm.
You almost have to be an optimist to make it through
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you really do. You really do. And you have to say, no, I'm going to get through this and it's going to be worth it. And
Yeah.
it is like, it is worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. Jessie, thank you so much for joining me and sharing so much. Again, I'm going to
Oh,
link all of the videos and all of the places it's been featured in the show notes. So for anyone listening, you have to go see it to really see how this comes to life, because I promise it is unlike anything you have seen before, especially in a log cabin. And that's really what caught my eye. And I'm just pumped to get to hear a little bit more behind how that came to life.
well, thank you so much. It was so fun to talk about it. I could keep going. So I appreciate you letting me run my mouth.
I loved it. I'm so grateful you could join us. Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.